My name is Dr. Josephine Plattner, and my superpower is creating business cultures that transform organisations team by team. I recently had an insightful conversation with Jeremy Utely, Adjunct Professor and co-founder of Stanford's Master of Creativity at the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design, commonly known as the D.school at Stanford. Jeremy is also the co-author of IDEAFLOW, the only business metric that matters, which has been translated into more than 10 languages and has been named a top 10 innovation work by Thinkers 50. Jeremy is a leading expert on the topic of innovation. His work has appeared in Time, Harvard Business Review, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and many other reputable publications. He's a general partner at Freespin Capital and lives just south of Stanford with his wife and 4 daughters. This conversation inspired me so much. I know you're going to feel the same way too. Hello, Jeremy. It's such a privilege to have you on the podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We've planned it for a while, so this is going to be a highlight of my week. I'm really keen for you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Some of them know you very well, some of them don't know you. So perhaps if you could just say a little bit about you and also, particularly what you're passionate about.
Sure, my pleasure. Yeah, I'm Jeremy Utely. I am married, happily married for almost 20 years, and father of 4 daughters. I have, for the past 15 years, been teaching at Stanford's Design Institute, where I teach graduate students and executives the methodology that we have pioneered here called design thinking, which is basically a way of helping folks maybe who have historically not thought of themselves as creative with the tools that, historically call it quote unquote creative people have used to solve problems, really teaching them that everyone has the capacity to be creative, and they need to grow that capacity. They need to grow their confidence and their competence to wield their creative skills. And so my passion is really helping individuals and helping organizations unleash the creative potential of their people.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I know that a lot of the real foundations of this work has been done at Stanford, and you have you have quite a track record in this area. How did you get to Stanford? What was your pathway? Where did you start?
Yeah, I was actually a student in the business school, and I had been a management consultant. I was a finance professional and had every intention of going back into consulting. And I had an opportunity to work at a startup in India in 2008. And I spent the summer in just outside of Delhi in Noida, and had a transformative experience actually with design, seeing how the team used design to solve real human problems in the world. And it sparked my curiosity and my interest. And I went back to Stanford thinking, I've got to take some of these classes. And so as a graduate student in the business school, I came over to the D.school, which was radically different environment and orientation. And I'm with people from engineering and the humanities and computer science and law and medicine. And we're all kind of immersed in this methodology. And it floored me. It was really an eye-opening experience that derailed, or you could say re-railed my life.
Isn't that amazing? And I think that multidisciplinary approach too is so exciting. Once you get immersed in that, it's really exciting, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you have an idea, and then I remember very distinctly, we were working on a product to enable folks who, in India in particular, our project partners in India, we were working to develop kind of an energy storage solution. They'll build their homes 1 brick at a time. Literally, they'll buy a brick at a time, right, to build the home. We thought, well, what if you could store, and a generator is an enormous investment, but there's no brick of a generator, right? You build a house a brick by brick, but you can't build a generator. Well, what if you could actually? We had envisioned this idea of like a battery system that as you kind of clicked it together, the capacity of the battery actually increased, right? And we have this idea, well, then the electrical engineer just whips out CAD and starts kind of like mocking up, going, you mean like this? And we're like, and so that was a moment where it's one thing for us to be talking about something. It's another thing for somebody to be able to just make it, right? And
Exactly.
that interdisciplinary collaboration, that's really where the magic happens. And yet I would say most individuals, most organizations don't really have, they have very robust practices for operations within a discipline or within a function. But when it comes to collaborating between disciplines, most of the time, most of the participants check their expertise at the door and defer
Yeah.
to someone who's kind of the localized expert. And what design thinking is, it's really a language for interdisciplinary collaboration to amplify the collective contributions of each of the respective members rather than having them leave their expertise at the door.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you define that because let's not assume people know what design thinking is. I think that if you were going to give me a crash course on what design thinking is, because there's a suite of methods there as well. How would you
Yeah.
describe that, just to kind of get everyone on the same page?
Yeah, it's a methodology. It's a tool set for interdisciplinary teams to use to generate potential solutions to real business and human problems.
Mm, mm. Yeah, fantastic. And what I love about design thinking, and my introduction to design thinking was when I was leading strategic change at Telstra, which is a multinational telecommunications company based
Mm,
in Australia, and we actually had a design thinking center. We were building that internal capability because we
mm.
saw the real power of that in linking people right across the organization, from your network engineering all the way through to your frontline customer service people, sort
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
creating, like a lab where people can come together and solve problems. So we saw that, and it was amazing and almost that play that it introduces to
Mm,
the ideation, and being able to play with ideas and doing that before you go to solution, because I think um, that's the other symptom I think that we see in organizations who are perhaps um, not not enabling the potential of creativity, is running to solutions or one solution too quickly.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
No, yeah, there's this, I mean, it's a deeply held cognitive bias called the Einstein effect, where, and it's true for individuals, it's true for the organization, that there's a tendency to just fixate on an early solution, despite the fact that there's no empirical evidence that suggests that the quality of a
yeah.
solution is correlated to its arrival time. In fact, there's a lot of research that suggests the variable that impacts the quality of your solutions the most is actually the quantity of your solutions.
Right.
And yet,
Yes.
I think the average corporate brainstorm yields something like 2 ideas, right?
Yeah.
So you wonder, well, why don't we have? And here's kind of the shocking thing, getting a little bit to play, but I would just say play is an example of a counter-cultural, counterintuitive lever. Play is certainly one, but a lot of times organizations will say, why don't we have better ideas? And for me, the answer often is because you don't have worse ideas. And it's actually it's the safety and the divergence of thinking that embraces bad ideas that actually yields better ideas. And because most folks just want good, they just want safe, they end up with mediocre. And it's actually, that's the real danger. That's the real
Mm.
enemy, is a culture that's just looking for good enough. And yet it's a kind of an unspoken rule that you have to make it explicit and recalibrate to according to a different set of objectives and rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I absolutely agree. And you say to think out of the box, you have to get out of the box. What are some other
Hmm.
ways that really recommend to get out of the box?
Yeah, I mean, it's that statement is easy to say, but yet it's hard for people to do,
Mm.
because they got meetings, they got, email, Slack messages, whatever. There's all sorts of reasons to stay in the box. And yet nothing interesting happens in the office. The interesting stuff is actually outside of the office. And yet it's really hard for people to get out. It's really hard. So one way to get out of the box is you actually have customer meetings. You go visit your customers. You see what they're
Mm.
doing in their environment. You see the problems they're facing in their environment, right? That fuels your own understanding and your purpose. Another way to get out of the box is to seek. I mean, I would say customer meetings are kind of a subset of a broader category of activity, which is getting inspiration. And one of the important reasons to get out of the box is because that's where you get inspired, and the outputs of our thinking are a function of the inputs to our thinking. So if you want different output, well, you need different input, right? And if you're sitting in the same place, talking to the same people, doing the same things, you go, why am I not coming up with different ideas? Well,
That's so true.
It's I can promise you're never going to come up with new ideas if you keep doing the same thing, right? And so you can vary your routines, but I've heard of silly things like changing the path that you take to work. I've heard of things like that heads of banks have undertaken and employed, right? So not circus clowns, but real legitimate professionals with nothing against clowns.
Hey, let's not diss the circus clowns.
Yeah,
I'm a
nothing
performer.
against clowns, but I mean, I think there's a sense in which a lot of professionals can kind of roll their eyes.
Yeah.
Like that. You hear the word inspiration, you're like, oh, you mean like the poster on the wall that says courage? It's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. When I say inspiration, I mean the disciplined pursuit of unexpected input. That's inspiration.
Yeah.
And for folks who come from a creative field, I remember when I was in business school, my wife's a fashion designer. She had to go to Paris on an inspiration trip. And I'm like, this is a boondoggle. You're just getting macarons, No, she's not. She's getting inspiration.
Yeah.
And she came back and she was super inspired. And I found myself going, I can't put that in a spreadsheet. It doesn't add up. And I asked my friend, I was teaching a class to a bunch of MBAs, and my co-teacher is a hip hop artist named Lecrae. I just asked Lecrae, what do you think about inspiration? And he dropped a bar. As only a hip hop artist can. He said, inspiration is a discipline. And I realized in that moment, as I was looking at people's faces, they're kind of like, their far off stare. It was like a time warp looking at myself 10 years earlier as I'm in my spreadsheet. My wife goes to Paris. Inspiration's not even on their radar as a tool, as a possibility, let alone a routine in their life.
Yeah.
And so I feel the reason I say this isn't about circus clowns is because some of these words that we use, people in kind of air quote, if you could see the video of this, you'd see these huge ironic air quotes, these professional contexts where of course we don't play here. I go, great, good luck. You can't do anything worth doing if you can't play, if you can't laugh, if you can't leave the building. Who is a great example of getting inspiration is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs I remember once he was frustrated with the way the Macintosh team was working on the computer, and he left the office. He stormed out. He went to the Macy's in Palo Alto, and he's kind of haunting the aisles, up and down the aisles, and he finds a Cuisinart food mixer, and he's like, yes, and he brought it back to the studio. He said, the computer should look like this.
Yeah.
And we all, because we've seen the Mac and we go, oh yeah, I can see that. But think about like being an early computer designer. They're like, what? Right? But the point is, Steve Jobs knew what very few professionals do, which is like, when you're stuck, get up and get out. And again, think out of the box by getting out of the box it's a simple way of saying it. But what are your instincts or what's the muscle memory around how you respond to being stuck? It's really important.
Yeah. And, in Australia, a lot of us are still working at home for most of the week. And I think that that's created a bit of stuckness as well. And, many organizations.
And yet, what a shame. Sorry to interrupt, but what a shame. Because there's so much potential inspiration. Like the conference room, by the way, is never where creativity flourished. Okay. So it's not like the reason that we aren't creative is because we're no longer in that, glorious conference room where creativity was blossoming. No, we have all sorts of creative inputs within arm's reach, as it were.
Yes.
And yet, as you're saying, we're stifled. To me, it's one of the most untapped potential for inspiration moments in the history of mankind. We are all like the friction is so dramatically reduced to get out of literally I just have to walk out of my garage here. Yeah. And yet I'll spend the whole day hunched over my keyboard. Yeah. It's insane.
Exactly. So I'm thinking a daily routine of taking that unexpected route. I have beautiful, where I live in, I'm in inner city Melbourne, and I have beautiful laneways, and I often take an unexpected route through the laneways. They're cobbled street laneways, and sometimes you come across really amazing artwork that someone's just put in a laneway for maybe no one to see. And that is really inspiring. So I think that's what you're talking about, Jeremy, is take that unexpected route. And sometimes it's about meeting people too, kind of creating opportunities to talk to someone new and talk to someone who you might not necessarily talk to as well,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, yeah. I think folks, they want creativity or they want solutions to be so deterministic, and so they can't appreciate something like randomness. I promise
Yeah,
there's a point here. But
yeah.
randomness is actually profoundly valuable to the creative pursuit. So say you're facing a problem. I'm trying to figure out how to build trust amongst my team.
Mm.
Okay. How do I do that? Well, okay, well, I can sit here and I can think about it. Maybe I can look at my bookshelf, which is better than nothing.
Mm-mm.
But it's like, I'm just gonna send the email. I don't know how to do that, right? Well, why don't you just like walk down the street? And if you walk down the street with this question of trust, the Amazon truck passes by and I can go, how does Amazon build trust? Oh, well, they put their logo on the tape, which is like the most forgettable part of the package, but they've
Yeah.
used it as a way to signal interesting. Is there a forgettable thing that I could use to signal? And then
Oh,
I go by the kids' playground, and I go, how does a playground build trust? Well, the flooring underneath the jungle gym is a different material. It signals safety. Ooh, how could I show people there's something safe underneath them? And then I walk by the nail salon at the corner, right?
mm-mm.
How do they build trust? Oh, they've got pictures in the front of all the different nail designs they've done. Right. Well, and the point being, I took a problem in my mind and I
Yeah.
got out in the world and I was willing to entertain the possibility of serendipitous connections.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not the only way to do it. But the point is, I think that a lot of people go, unless I know where I'm going and exactly what I'm going
Yes.
to learn, I'm not going to do it. And I go, whoa,
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is to get out, not knowing where you're going, not knowing what you're going to get out of it, and allow the amazing kind of connections that form to form. And at the very
Yeah.
least, at the very, very least, you will have reinvigorated yourself to get back to your
Yes.
desk and
With
to
that
keep
vigor.
focusing. Yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
exactly.
Yeah. I really love that. I can see how I can apply that straight away in the work that I do with teams. Often I'm hitting up against that because often I do a lot of work resetting or relaunching teams with team leaders, and the team leader wants some assurance about the experience at the end of the offsite or at the end of the session.
Mm,
And
mm.
I'm a little bit taken with this idea of randomness. So I'll see if I can inject some of that. I think that would be lovely. And you're saying, Jeremy, and I know that a lot of what you do is evidence based. There's an evidence base for this as well. It's like you're saying, um, it's not just nice to have. We know, don't we, through the evidence, through the research, that this is something that really does inspire creativity and innovation.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, one of my favorite researchers is a gentleman named Amos Tversky, who's the research partner to Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize
Hmm.
for inventing the field of behavioral economics. Like
Yeah,
literally,
yeah,
prior to Kahneman and Tversky, we thought humans were rational beings. Okay,
yeah.
this is the world we lived in prior to Kahneman and Tversky, right? And Tversky, once and there, you think about their output, their work output was basically radical and inventive
Mm,
experiments. They designed some
absolutely.
amazing experiments. Someone asked Amos Tversky once, how did you and Danny do it? How did you design such? I never could even think of those experiments. And you know
Yeah.
what Amos Tversky said? This is his actual quote. The secret to doing good research is to always be a little underemployed. You waste years when you can't waste hours.
Mm, yeah.
And he was referring to the fact that he and Kahneman would take these long ambling walks around Hebrew University,
Mm-mm-mm.
and they were laughing and they were joking and they were reinventing the field of behavioral
Yeah,
economics. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing. I love that story. And yeah, absolutely. What a legacy that's left as well. So really, really important. A lot of in the area of innovation, a lot of organizations, particularly in Australia and other organizations I know globally, are using things like deliberate time or space in organizations. They'll put some time into hackathons and bringing people together. Are you a fan of creating that space? Because I know that you talk about that a little bit.
Yes, if.
Tell me more about the yes if.
So good. I am all about, I mean, innovation is not an event. Innovation is a practice, it's a capability, et cetera. So that's not to say that events don't have a place. They do. But if you treat innovation like it only happens at the sprint,
Yeah.
here's a question. How many medals have you won? And for most people, they have a bunch of sprints or a bunch of hackathons, and they have nothing in the trophy case.
Yeah.
And you wonder why. Well, here's why. Who's practicing?
Yeah.
Who's in the gym? Who's on the track? You know, most people show up to the sprint, and you know what they do? They pull a hamstring. Okay?
I love it.
There's no trophy. They're in the hospital. Why? They pull a hamstring because they haven't stretched. And then they're told to go sprint. I mean, it's like, imagine if you and I go, okay, Josephine, we're both going to go sprint around the block right now.
Yeah.
We both come back limping, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because you have to stretch, you have to warm up, you have to condition, and then the sprint can serve it is the place to win medals.
Yeah.
Provided that you've been doing the work of practice.
Yeah.
For many organizations, the sprint has become a replacement for practice. That will never work.